Hello, good afternoon. It's really nice to be here. This is my first visit to your school, and I'm already very impressed. So thank you, all of you, for coming out this afternoon to hear a little bit about ancient medicine and religion and the ways those two intersected for the ancient Greeks and Romans. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, good. All right, so I want to begin. I like to begin often with an image and just take a close look at that and see what we see together. So I just want us to look at this image on the screen. This is from a Roman wall painting from the city of Pompeii, which you may know about. You probably know that Pompeii was a city that was buried in a volcanic eruption in the 1st century AD. And as a result of that, a lot of beautiful art has been well preserved under those layers of ash at Pompeii. So we're seeing a wall painting here, and I wonder if anybody would be willing to tell me what you see. Don't be worried about saying anything too basic. There is no such thing. What do you see? And I'm okay if you talk. I can point to you, but also just feel free to talk. Right. Somebody seems to be doing some surgery on somebody's leg. I don't think my pointer is working. I'm going to walk over. Exactly. So in this area here, some surgery. Good. What else do you see? Oh, yes. Go ahead, gentlemen. Right. This figure looks like, covering the face, not happy, right? Crying, something. Yeah. Something not good. Yes.
There's a brown thing behind the guy. What is that?
Yeah, are you talking about this? Is that the brown thing?
Yeah.
Good. Can anybody tell me what might be happening? Can you see enough in the background here? What is that brown thing? Yeah.
They're like a soldier.
They're soldiers. That's a shield. Good. So we have some military scene, right? You've got somebody with their leg is injured. We've got somebody trying to do something medical on that leg. We've got a young person who looks a little unhappy. Yeah.
It's like an angel-like person.
Right, an angel-like person in the background. Absolutely. Kind of this beautiful circle of billowing clothing going around her. Yes.
The guy that's healing him, what's his name?
What's his name? Do you know? Does this ring a bell? I wonder if some of you might know this because it's from a very famous Roman poem. It's a scene out of Virgil's Aeneid. Does that ring a bell? Has anybody read Virgil's Aeneid? I don't know if you have. Some of you have. Okay. Yes, I see a hand over here. Yes.
Achilles?
No, not Achilles. The other side. Yes.
Useless?
No. Yes.
Odysseus?
Nope. So the Greeks defeat the Trojans at Troy, and then we've got the Trojan refugees, right? They leave from Troy, and one of those Trojans comes to Italy, and his descendants will found Rome. Do you remember who that is? Yes. Aeneas. Okay, so good. That's who this is. In fact, this is Aeneas. And you asked about who the man is who's performing this healing. His name is Iapix, and he's there healing the leg of Aeneas. Aeneas, what has happened, as we know, because this is also discussed in Virgil's Aeneid, is that Aeneas has been wounded by an arrow in his leg, and the man Iapix is trying to extract the arrowhead from the leg, and he really can't do it. So the woman in the background is actually Aeneas's mother. Yes. And who is his mother? I heard you say it. Venus, right. The goddess Venus is in the background. And you might notice it's a little hard to see in a distance, but she has a little green plant in her hand. And according to Virgil, she goes off to Crete and pulls this herb, and she creates sort of a poultice, a kind of paste or ointment that Iapix will apply to the leg of Aeneas, and then bingo, the arrowhead just flies right out. What we're seeing here, though, that I think is really lovely is this combination of a human, of the guy kneeling down, healing, that's the doctor. He is called in Roman language, that's a medicus, is what the word for a doctor. We see him working sort of alongside a divine healer, right? Venus in the background, who is sort of boosting the mortal doctor's abilities. what we're going to talk about, there are two things I want to sort of bring to the foreground today for you. First of all, that physicians and gods both were popular healers in Greek and Roman antiquity. So, and we'll see them often working alongside one another, not competing, but working together to heal people. Also, when you talk about Roman medicine, you're really talking about Greek medicine. A lot for the ancient Romans, many of the practitioners who healed people within Rome, even the Roman Empire, were Greeks. So they came over and they brought their medical knowledge into Rome. So when we talk about ancient medicine, in the Greco-Roman world, we're talking a lot about Greek medicine. So I'm going to focus on the Greeks today, but it applies to the Roman world because those ideas were picked up by the Romans and carried forth. They were enriched by the Romans. All right. Now, to talk about the Greeks, I want to go back to, actually farther back to the Trojan War. I want to go back to Homer and his version of the Trojan War for a few moments here. How many of you have ever read the Iliad? Has anybody read the Iliad? Some of you have. Okay. Big battle, epic poem. Greeks fighting Trojans. And so a battle epic, great place to think about healthcare. You can imagine, right? You've got a lot of battle wounds and you've got other kinds of illness too. So in this epic, the way it opens may not be what you expect, but the very beginning of the Iliad, there is a healthcare crisis. There is an epidemic disease that we don't know. The word plague is just a generic word for what the disease is. We don't know for sure what it was. What they thought happened, though, is very interesting here. You see, I have a slide of the god Apollo, and he's shooting at the very beginning of the Iliad. He's described as shooting plague arrows down upon the Greek troops. So the Greeks are suffering, they are dying, and they ask for help from a seer, a prophet, to tell them what's going wrong. And what they learn is that Apollo is not happy with them. They have angered Apollo, and so Apollo makes them all sick with this plague.
What did they do exactly?
Well, what they did was disrespected one of his priests. Yeah, and that's never a good thing, as you can imagine, right, in antiquity. So Apollo gets angry and shoots plague arrows down. And so many people suffer until, well, how do you heal a plague? If that's your cause, what do you think? How is it going to ever be lifted? What was that?
Sacrifice.
Very good. Sacrifices, things that are going to please him and make him not be angry anymore. And then he stops shooting the plague arrows. Now, this is nice metaphorically for thinking about how the very early Greeks understood, say, internal ailments, like things like if you have a fever, let's say you have a really nagging chronic headache, if you have something like, the flu or something internal, that's going on inside your body. Before they understood other ways of illness causation, they thought that was caused by the gods. Those illnesses were caused by gods. And basically, you upset the gods, some god or gods, and therefore the gods sent an illness upon you. That's how they used to think about it. And what we're going to look at today is what changes in Greek antiquity and what's new so that they're no longer thinking in those terms. So those are internal ailments in the Iliad. But of course, we see battle wounds, loads of battle wounds in the Iliad. It's full of them. Before I look at that, I just want to remind you, it's always nice to think about what the ancient world and the modern world have to do with each other, right? Where are these moments where they can inform one another? This is a slide from the U.S. Civil War, and just worth thinking about, again, we might think combat wounds were the real cause of death there, but no. Many people died in the Civil War. 2 out of 3 deaths were caused by disease rather than by battle itself. So always kind of interesting to think about these universals that we see going all the way back to Greek antiquity and here even in the modern world. Yes?
Did the sickness come from the battle wounds?
Sometimes they would get sickness from the battle wounds themselves, but they were also suffering from other kinds of disease. Depending on where they were, what time of year it was, you might have things like malaria going through the troops. but also so communicable diseases were coming, not just, say, gangrene caused by wounds. Okay, but there were also battle wounds, and there's in the Iliad, we have lots of people who heal those. This is a vase painting you're seeing on the right, Achilles, the great Greek warrior Achilles, and he's bandaging his friend Patroclus, who has a wound to his arm. So a lot of soldiers in the Iliad could heal you. Yes?
Is that a candle?
A candle. Are you talking about this?
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's not a candle. That's an interesting idea. I like that. No, this is his quiver, Patroclus's quiver, where he put arrows into it. I don't know what this little phalange thing that looks like a candle wick, I don't know what that is. What is that? I'm sorry? Tied a cover on. Very nice idea. I like it. I don't know.
Maybe the thing was worn out, a couple strings were loose.
Maybe. Yeah, I like these ideas. These are good ideas. So we have warriors who have some healing ability, but I want to tell you who the best healers are on the battlefield. They have a special name. Again, my pointer doesn't work very well, so I'll walk over. In Greek, that word, like medicus in Latin, in Greek, it's iatros, and it means physician. And that word comes down to us in a lot of our English words for healers. Words like pediatrician. So the word ped is the word for a child. So a healer of children is a pediatrician, a psychiatrist, that's an iatros of your psyche, your soul, and a podiatrist, of course, your foot doctor, right? So that iatr word is with us today. I'm showing you here a statue of a man. His name is Asclepius, and in Homer's Iliad, he is described as an iatros, as a doctor. He's the best of all the mortal doctors, right? The highest, the best trained doctor. And we're going to talk about him more here today. I heard, yeah, sorry.
Did he end up becoming like a god of medicine?
Yes, indeed. And we're going to talk about him here in a moment. Good. So if we just want to summarize what we know so far in the Iliad, this is very early Greek understanding of healing. You have gods who can heal you, and they will heal you also of battle wounds, but particularly also of internal ailments, diseases. You have mortals like Achilles who can heal, and then really skilled mortals. So those are the iatroi. Okay. So that's what we've got in the early Greek period. And now we're going to look in a moment here at what changes over time. I just have a side note for you for a moment here. That picture in the middle of Achilles healing Patroclus comes from a vase painting that's on the inside of a cup. And the picture on the left actually shows that same painting. And at the bottom here, you can see the shape of the cup better from the outside. The name of this cup is a kylix. And it's what the Greeks used at a symposium for drinking out of. They drink wine out of it as they were sitting around sharing stories or discussing events or playing music. They drink out of this out of this cup called a kylix. And what I'd like to think about here is sort of how were these cups used and why that kind of image in particular at the bottom. So maybe you come to a symposium and you are given a cup full of wine, and as you drain that cup of wine, you don't know what that cup looks like at the bottom. You don't know what the image is, but as you drain it, you realize you end up with a cup that shows you Achilles bandaging Patroclus, which I think is fun to think about is like, why an image of healing at a symposium? And I want to come back to this image too, which I said was a wall painting from Pompeii. It was hanging in a room called a triclinium. I don't know if any of you have studied Roman architecture. Does anybody know what a triclinium is? I got some hands up. Yes. Were you raising your hand? Yes. Please go ahead. Yeah, a sitting room. Yeah, they had couches in it. What would they do on those couches? Take naps? Yes, that's, I'd do it too. Recline, exactly. They would have also symposia. They would dine in a triclinium. You're right, it has couches. They would recline to drink wine, to eat food together. And I just am struck by the fact that that painting of Aeneas hangs in a triclinium in a dining room. And this is just to make a kind of side note. I'm just making a side note here. I think it's fascinating, though, this idea of dining room decoration, whether it's on your china set, like your drinking cups, or on the wall paintings. What was it about these scenes of healing, which are kind of, the one on the right is a little graphic. You see the blood coming out of the leg and so on. Like, how did this make good dining room decoration? I don't know, but I think it's interesting to think about. And, I'm reminded that if you think about what's on television today, there are these medical procedurals. We kind of are drawn, right, to these. I don't know. We're kind of curious what happens in a hospital, in a surgery room, in an ER. Grey's Anatomy. Is that still on TV? You know what I'm talking? Yeah, it is. My God, that's been on television for like a decade or something right now. But you see how much of a draw it has. People are fascinated. So I just want to point this out, that it's part, I think, of sort of human nature to be fascinated by this subject matter. All right. We're going to fast forward now. It doesn't feel like fast forwarding, but we're going forward from Homer to the 5th century BCE. So I'm talking about the 400s BCE. Now, when I was talking about Homer, if you're very interested, maybe 300 years before this, I would put Homer and the Iliad. So we're now roughly 300 years beyond that, till in the 5th century BCE. And we get a very famous physician. I'm sure you've heard of him. His name is Hippocrates. Have you heard of him before? How have you heard of him? Anything about him Just shout it out. Yeah.
The Hippocratic Oath.
Yes, the Hippocratic Oath, right? So many of you have heard of that. So if you go to medical school today, many people still swear some version of a Hippocratic Oath. And it's named after this man, this famous physician from Greek antiquity. What Hippocrates and his followers start doing, we call them just as a group the Hippocratics, they start writing down their medical knowledge, and that's how we know what they were thinking. That's how we know how they believed the body worked. So we have textbooks from this time period that tell us that the Greeks thought at this point, the big change is people like Hippocrates say, nope, the gods don't make you sick. I believe in the gods, he says. They all do. They're very pious people. They believe in the gods. But they say, in fact, the gods are too pure and holy to make you sick. They're not making people sick. What's making us sick is things in our environment. The air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink. Think about that today, right? Think about what's happening in Flint, Michigan, if you've heard about that, the water crisis in Flint, Michigan. Of course our environment affects us, and they knew that in Greek antiquity. More importantly, or beyond that, in conjunction with that, in the environment, they think that the environment interacts with the inside of our body. And this is where they thought a little differently than we do. They thought that inside your body, you have fluids that are very important. Of course, we do too, right? But their idea was we have 4 very important fluids in our bodies. Blood and phlegm, you recognize, right? And then there's yellow bile and black bile. And these are substances in our body. And, what they were doing too is, they weren't able to look inside the body easily. They might see the inside of the body if they saw somebody who was wounded in battle, maybe. But they're not dissecting bodies. They're not opening them up. So what they're looking at is what comes out of bodies, right? And they can easily see these 4 fluids in various ways coming out of our bodies, right? So that's where they get this idea of 4 humors. If a body is healthy, all these humors or fluids are in good balance with one another. But maybe we eat something that causes one fluid to go in excess and become too much of that fluid in our bodies, or something else in our environment might throw these out of whack. So then, to heal the body, what do we need to do? If that's our logic, to heal your body, what do I have to do?
Get medicine.
What is that medicine supposed to be doing?
Helping your body
To do what?
balance it out.
That's it. Balance it out. Precisely.
Where do they get black and yellow bile from?
So if we think about our bodies and what our bodies excrete, what comes out of our bodies, can you think of, I'm going to let you think about it. Think about what comes out of your body that might map onto something yellow. There you go. Yeah, you're okay. And something darker, right? So that's it. That's what they were looking at, the same things that we see coming out of our bodies today. So yes, exactly. They were trying to rebalance these fluids. And there are different ways they tried to rebalance the fluids. And here I'll just show you a few of them. Here you're seeing a vase painting of a physician seated on the left. Can you see what's in his hand? Yeah. Yeah, something to poke them. It's not a leech. That's a good idea. It's actually probably a scalpel. He's got a little instrument in his hand. You could sort of make it out here. And this gentleman in front of him is holding out his arm, and he's going to cut into a vein. And the blood, you can't see it here on the slide very well, but there's a red trickle coming down from the arm. He's bleeding the patient. And this happened a lot in Greek antiquity, was the idea that we're going to bleed patients and hopefully restore humoral balance. There are also things hanging on the wall here that are hard to see in the background, and I'll show them to you in a moment. But notice these things. These are these things. Any idea what these are? Yeah.
Like lamps.
Not lamps. Good, very nice guess. And you might have seen them today. They're still used today. There was an Olympic swimmer, Michael Phelps, had this done. Yes. Beautiful. Cupping. They're cupping vessels, cupping instruments. These were heated up and applied to the skin, and they create kind of suction on the skin. And they were thought to help rebalance humors under the surface of the skin. These become a sort of shorthand for physicians in antiquity. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
They use leeches to do that too.
We don't know that they used leeches in antiquity. Leeches were used often for bloodletting, right? And that's, it's fascinating to think that really into the early 20th century even, doctors were still using leeches for bloodletting, and that's why doctors were often called leeches. It's because they would use leeches. I mean, this is an idea. Humoral theory sticks with us until at least well into the 19th century. It's amazing how long these ancient Greek and Roman ideas continue. So these are cupping instruments, as I say. Here are these are actually gravestones or tombstones of physicians from antiquity. And again, you see them seated. Here's one. There's a young boy standing in front of him, but on the back wall are two cupping instruments. And this one on the right is a physician palpating his patient. He's feeling around the stomach, the belly of the boy in front of him, or the man. It's hard to tell. And you see here a giant, superhuman-sized cupping instrument. It's like a flashing neon sign that says, "I'm a physician." You know how they have barber poles today, kind of to say physician or surgeon, or they did at least for a long time. That's the equivalent of it here. So you'll see them a lot. We do have medical instruments surviving from Greek and Roman antiquity, and that's cool to think about too. We have quite a lot of them. Many of them are made out of bronze, and here you're seeing a cupping instrument in the back there, of course, but you're also seeing things like forceps, kind of like Eopix was using in that painting. This is a little scoop over which you could hold it over a flame and heat up medicine in it. You have spatula, and it looks like a scalpel here, and a probe. And oh my, this makes me cringe. This is a gynecological instrument. So they were interested in gynecology. They wrote treatises about gynecology in antiquity. And then this object in the box here is just a medicine box. And over time, we see these medicine boxes, and look, here's our friend again. Back from Homer's time, the Iatros, Asclepius, he's on the lid of these medicine boxes. So Asclepius is always easy to pick out because he has a walking staff with a serpent around it. The reason he has a walking staff, in fact, there was a walking staff, I'm going to go back a couple slides here. On that slide on the left, you see the physician holds a walking staff. They held walking staffs because a lot of them were what we call itinerant. That is, they walked around and served multiple towns. So they moved around the ancient world to help people. So here your physician has a walking staff, so does Asclepius, and Asclepius also has a snake around his walking staff. And of course, we'll talk about that more in a moment. So here's the thing. At the same time that Hippocrates comes along, and starts writing his medical treatises, we learn that the guy on the left, our Iatros, by about that time, we don't know exactly when it happened, had been deified. He had become a god. And the story goes that his grandfather is Zeus, his father is Apollo, and then you get Asclepius. And apparently Zeus brings him up to Olympus, makes him a full-fledged god, sometime between the time of Homer and the 400s BC. We also learned that around that time, that very early on, Asclepius becomes the patron god of physicians. Most crafts in antiquity, if you were a potter or a shoemaker or whatever, you had a patron god. And for the physicians, their patron god was Asclepius. And I think this is so nicely illustrated on this little seal stone, and you're seeing an impression of it on the left here, so you can see it more easily. But you see, again, a physician seated, and he's examining his patient. And then off to the side, the man with his staff and serpent is Asclepius, right? He's looking on as the physician is healing. This reminds us in some way of that image we started with today, right? Of Aeneas being healed, where the surgeon or the doctor was there helping him. And then we have Venus also lending a hand. So what I'd like to do a little bit more today in the time we have left, I don't know how we're doing on time. I hope someone will just stop me when it's time to stop. I would like to take you to a sanctuary of Asclepius and show you how he healed, because I think it's fun and it's different and it's interesting. And it sets the stage, in fact, for the kind of healing we'll see later in, say, the early 1st century AD, when we get to the narratives of Jesus as a healer. It's interesting to me as we think about Christianity and the development of Christianity that Jesus was appealing to many people because he was a healer. And that picks up on the importance of people like Asclepius. So I'll talk about that more in just a few moments. Now, Asclepius, before we go back to I'm going to take you to a very early sanctuary of Asclepius, but I want you to get a sense of the effect of Asclepius. He is the most popular healing god of Greek and Roman antiquity. Almost any god could heal you, and almost every god was worshipped for healing. But Asclepius was really, really popular, and so popular that when you get to the height of the Roman Empire, and this is a map of the Roman Empire in 117, sort of at the height of the Roman Empire under Trajan. And that orange area is the extent of the Roman Empire. We have evidence for worship of Asclepius from Hispania, from Spain in the west, to Ecbatana in the east, all the way over to where the Parthians are, all the way north from Britain in the north to Egypt in the south. So he was very widely worshipped as a healer. People went to him in droves. Let's see what was so special about him. So I'm going to take you now to his first sanctuary, one of his most popular ones as well. It's at a site called Epidauros here in Greece. You can see the boot of Italy over there. Here is Greece, and then in the southern part of Greece is Epidauros. Here's a plan. You can just see the footprint of his sanctuary on this plan on the left, and here's an overview of it on the right, a photograph of it. It doesn't survive so well. The superstructure of these buildings doesn't stand too well, with one exception, and I'll show that in a moment. But this is a big sanctuary. You know, we talk about mega churches today. I would call this a mega sanctuary. It's big, and a lot of people would come here. You know, it's kind of up there at the ranks, if you've heard of the Sanctuary of Zeus at Olympia, where the Olympic Games were held. It's sort of like that in terms of size. And you have all sorts of structures here to support people both coming to worship the god for big festival occasions and also to be healed by the god. So just a few things here, and I'm going to show you this in a moment. You have a theater down here, a theater. So you've got music and song and dance being performed. You have this is like a hotel for people to stay in. You've got a bath building here for people to bathe as they're staying in the sanctuary for a while. This big number 7 building is a dining hall for people to eat in. Number 9 here is a little bit cut off. It should have like a horseshoe end here. At the end, it's a running track. So you get your exercise while you're in the sanctuary. So they've got all sorts of facilities to support people who are staying for a little while, whether for a festival or, as I say, to be healed. The one structure that survives beautifully is this, the theater. It's the theater itself. It's a gorgeous theater, and if you ever go to Greece, I hope you will go to the sanctuary just to see the theater. They still do performances. There are theater performances held in this theater every summer. Theater in ancient Greece was outside in the open air, and now they hold the theater performances in the evening as the sun is going down. It's just magical. So if you ever go to Greece, I hope you can go to this beautiful theater. But what we're going to be concerned with is actually this part of the sanctuary, the very center of the sanctuary, where people came for healing in particular. So what we're looking at here in this slide, and more easy to visualize down here in this reconstruction, you can see here there we have a temple. This is the temple of Asclepius. It's represented here on our plan. And in the background, you've got a building that's actually quite long. It's that now long, narrow building at the top. It's called a stoa. The word in Greek is stoa, S-T-O-A, and it just means kind of a covered shed building almost. These are used for lots of things in Greek antiquity, but it's in this particular sanctuary, we think people went into that building for healing in particular. And you can see out here in the front, represented here on the plan, is an altar. You know, one of the ways that when we think about Greek antiquity, that worship was different than maybe in our tradition, in the Christian tradition, is that Christians and also Jews and Muslims, right, tend to worship inside buildings. They go inside a church building or inside a structure. And think of where you find altars today. Where do you find an altar in a church? In the center, inside the building. That was not the case in Greek antiquity. The altars were outside. Why do you think that would be the case in Greek antiquity? If you even look at the slide, it's a practical reason in part. Yes?
They sacrifice things.
They sacrifice things, right? What kinds of things? Animals, right? So they're burning animals. The idea in Greek and Roman antiquity is that smell of the burning animals rises up to the gods, right? And they enjoy the smell. They can't eat the meat. The gods can't eat the meat, but they enjoy the smell. So it's a way of giving a gift to the gods that can reach them. And you just wouldn't do that inside a building. You'd have a room full of smoke very, very quickly, right? So the altars are outside the building. So worship tends to happen outside of buildings in Greek and Roman antiquity. So if you're coming to the sanctuary to be healed, you would have cleansed yourself. You would have used water to clean yourself. There's this idea, sort of, it's not that different, at least in symbolic ways, of cleansing, as you might know from walking into a church in the baptismal font in the church or something like that. So you'd cleanse yourself. You'd pay money to the priests. You would hold a sacrifice. You would bring some animal to sacrifice to the god. You might step inside the temple, not so much to worship the god, but just to see the wonderful gifts that are given to the god. It's the place where his statue is. You could see a statue of Asclepius. And then you would go into this long building for the healing ritual. And for this healing to happen, you had to go to sleep. This is a ritual that we call incubation. Oh, let me just show you. I'm sorry, we'll get there in a moment. This is a nice overview of all those buildings again. Notice how active it would have been. You have people around singing and dancing, sacrificing around an altar, maybe going into the temple. And then you've got this long building. It's a huge building, the Stoa building, where people go to be healed in this ritual of incubation. And here, in order to be healed, you'd go to sleep in the hope that the god would come to you in a dream and heal you. And he's going to heal you either usually by performing a medical procedure or prescribing a regimen for cure. And I brought some examples today of this because we're lucky to have recorded on stone what people said happened to them in these dreams. So we have these inscriptions from Epidaurus, and if you don't have a handout, it doesn't matter because I've got the text up here on the slides as well. So these healing narratives, again, tell us what people said happened to them. Now, I know you're going to, one of your questions might logically be, as we work through these, how in the world did this actually happen? Well, I mean, it's miraculous. I can't explain it to you. I don't know. We don't know what's happening, but people believed that the God healed them, right? So this is about faith. It's about belief. So let's take a look at a few of these here. Here's one for you. Arata from the area around Sparta. She suffers from hydrops or dropsy. It's a buildup of fluid in the body. It says her mother slept here in the sanctuary on behalf of her daughter, who remained in Sparta, and she sees a dream. It seemed that the god, I love this, cut off her daughter's head and hung her body with the neck towards the ground. When a lot of fluid had run out, he untied her body and put her head back on her neck. After she saw this dream, she returned to Sparta and found that her daughter was healthy and had seen the same dream. Well, now that's crazy. Cut off the head, tipped it over, drained the fluid out, put her back upright, sewed the head back on. But you have now just heard what the Hippocratics thought about how health worked, right? So can you, in Hippocratic terms, then explain to me what's going on here? Yeah.
It was a buildup of full fluids and God drained the excess.
Rebalancing the fluids. So what is interesting to me is that, again, Asclepius, remember, is a deified doctor. He's a doctor god. So he can take those techniques of human healers kind of to a superhuman level. No doctor in antiquity was decapitating his patients, as far as I know, right?
They were destroyed pretty fast.
Right. Let's brush that under the rug, right? That didn't go so well. Yeah. So no, they were not decapitating their patients. But again, the super doctor, the doctor god, can do that, is what they believed, right? So you have here rebalancing fluids and you have surgery. You have two things that we know physicians were using at that time. Here's another example of surgery. This is a man from Torone. I mean, it's nice that we also sometimes get their names and their hometowns, which is kind of fun. And then you get their ailment. Here's some leeches. This guy there swallowed them. When he was sleeping, he saw a dream. It seemed that the god opened his chest with a knife, took out the leeches and gave them in his hands and sewed his chest back together. I bring this to you as another example of surgery, right? It's not just that the god comes to you and lays his hands on you, right? It's some kind of procedure. He's doing something that you would have found familiar from going to your doctor. The other thing that I want to point out is who is going to Asclepius? Well, these are people who seem to have been suffering for a while. And I'll show you that in a moment in these cures. So they tend to have chronic ailments, not fatal ailments, but chronic ailments that their physicians cannot cure them of. So the way I tend to see this working is you go to your physician first, maybe a few times, maybe a few physicians, and he, and occasionally I will say she, we do know some female physicians from Greek, well, especially from Roman antiquity, but they can't cure you. So then maybe you go to your doctor god. Okay, here's another one. And this shows the god using drugs, so that's why I brought this in. Once a man came as a suppliant to the god who was so blind in one eye that while he still had the eyelids of that eye, there was nothing within them. They were completely empty. So he doesn't have sockets, and he just has a socket of the eye, nothing in it. In his sleep, a vision appeared to him. It seemed that the god boiled some drug, drew apart his eyelids, and then poured it in. When day came, he departed with both eyes. Again, I can't explain it. I have no idea. Right, but it's miracle. That's sort of the definition of a miracle, right? We can't explain what they thought was happening. The chronic nature of these ailments this is one of my favorite because of the graphic description here. But the chronic nature, there's a lot of attention to how long people suffered from things. Here is somebody, by the way, who suffered from a battle wound, but it was in a difficult part of the body that no physician could heal. So here's what happens. This man was wounded in the lung by an arrow in some battle, and for a year and 6 months, notice the accounting, for a year and 6 months, it festered so badly that he filled 67 bowls full of pus. That's fun. That's fun. When he was sleeping here, he saw a vision. The god drew the arrowhead from his lung. When day came, he left well carrying. And then you get a souvenir. He left with the arrowhead in his hands. I just love that, a little souvenir. But this is showing you how long that lingered and how much trouble it gave that man. And again, another one of my favorites, a woman who was pregnant for 5 years. I know. It's horrifying. Pregnant for 5 years. And what was going on here, I don't know. I have some thoughts about what it might have been. We do know that in Greek antiquity, there's sometimes women would think that they were pregnant and it was a tumor. But I also wonder sometimes, if you think about the pressure on women in antiquity to have children, it's always there. That's their job in Greek and Roman antiquity, is to have children. So I wonder if it doesn't even become, for some of these women, easier to say I'm pregnant, even when they're not pregnant, just as a way of turning aside some of the pressure, the societal pressure on them. I don't know. But in any case, she says she's pregnant for 5 years and she gives birth to a son. And that's it. I mean, the word 5 years is repeated a lot here. So these are just some examples of how the God healed. And then when you were healed, you didn't just sort of walk with your arrowhead gleefully out. Well, you maybe hopefully gleefully, but you didn't just leave the sanctuary. You had to thank the God. So you would give some kind of gift back to the God. And often what we find are gifts of sort of recreations of body parts, so the part of the body that might have affected you. Like this is one that carved in marble beautifully to Asclepius and his daughter, Hugiaea, from which we get our word hygiene. Her name means health. It's just a word for health in Greek, Hugiaea. So Asclepius and Hugiaea, I had good luck. Thank you. All right, good luck. Thanks. And we see these also fashioned out of clay. We know they were made out of wood and metal and all sorts of things. But all the little parts of the body, every little bit of the body that the God might have healed. The first mannequins. Or you know what? I just love on your phones now, like the little emoji. You can get, I don't know if your phones have it, but like you have ears and eyes and whatever. I think that it makes me think of these all the time. Yeah.
Why would these pictures of these important to use?
I'm sorry, say that again. I just didn't hear.
Why are these pictures are important to use?
Why are these like body parts?
Yeah, but why is important?
That's a great question. Why would the God think that's a good gift? Maybe? Yeah. I don't know if it's, it's interesting that it shows like a fragmenting of the body in a certain sense, right? I want to focus on this bit that you healed for me. But I do think what's really important with Asclepius is not only that he heals you of that body part, but he then there is a sense in which he's restoring you to your community. So I don't know if it's sort of like, here's a representation of the moment I was fragmented and sick, but that is also a reminder of bringing the body into totality. Okay, I know we're about out of time. Just a quick way to finish this up. This tradition continues in Christian worship today. These are images from a Greek Orthodox church, and you can see little pieces of metal with body parts on them. So the saints in Christian tradition often pick up this function. It's also the case that Jesus, when he comes along as a healer, is quickly going to push Asclepius sort of off to the side. It takes a few centuries for it to happen. But this idea is that, of course, that Jesus will take over as the healer who does more than Asclepius does, right? Jesus can heal you of the sins of your soul and all of that as well. This is just a little painting from a house church in Dura-Europos, and very hard to see here, but this is Jesus apparently healing a paralytic, so helping somebody to be able to walk again after he could not walk. So we see that's continuing. Of course, it goes over into the Christian tradition, that religious side of the healing. But the sort of that staff and serpent of Asclepius is still with us on the medical side today. It's there on the seals of most medical associations. So that's what I've got for you today. Thank you so much for listening.